Now that we have a better idea of what emotions are and the forces that affect our emotions, we need to start thinking about, well, how do we actually manage our emotional experience and our expression? In the previous video, I mentioned that we can always identify and label our emotions, but that some people are better at this than others. Those people who are usually better usually also have high emotional intelligence, also known as EI. People who have EI have a deep understanding of their own emotions. They usually can connect, I am feeling this particular way. And because they are able to self-reflect on their own emotions, it causes them to outwardly think about how other people are experiencing their emotions. They usually respond in a compassionate way. They can empathize. Furthermore, people who have EI tend to have more constructive as opposed to destructive emotion management. They may realize, in this moment I'm angry, but what would that mean in the long term to express this in a destructive way? Is there any way I can constructively express this anger? As I mentioned, our emotions are a very strong part of who we are, which means they're a very strong part of our interpersonal relationships. So because these people have high EI, they usually have really strong relationships, and they're very competent in how to navigate their interpersonal relationships. Now, some people don't always manage their emotions in constructive ways. After these emotions occur, some people decide to suppress the emotion. They don't want to feel it, they want to bottle it up, they want to tighten it down. Now, at times this can be because the emotion that we feel may not be exhibited in the best way in that particular environment. So someone getting an A on a test when their friend just bombed the test. Well, maybe you don't want to express how happy you are for yourself because you don't want to hurt your friend. So you would suppress your own emotion and not feel as happy or outwardly show it. Some people also want to suppress emotions because they just don't want to feel it in the moment. And so they minimize the actual reaction. There are some people who just like to vent. They want to talk about it. Now this is an intense emotion sharing. Most people will say, well, I just need to vent. I just need to get it out. Be mindful that yes, venting can be positive, but there can also be moments where people vent and vent and vent and never actually deal with the emotion. So be mindful of that as well. Some people like to prevent the emotions from even occurring. One way is to have encounter avoidance. So maybe, again, you just get really upset whenever your friend criticizes you on your cooking. So you just stop inviting your friend. That way, you avoid the encounter and the emotion completely. Maybe you have encounter structuring, where you go out to dinner and maybe only talk about certain topics because you know certain topics are your hot button issues. I have a friend and she loves her in-laws dearly, but they cannot talk about politics. So again, they structure their overall communication to not have to encounter negative emotions. There can be attention focus, to where you focus in on something else so that you can avoid having to deal with what's causing an undesired emotion. So maybe that person who just keeps tapping and tapping and tapping and tapping, and you decide to tune them out and focus in on your book that you're reading. Because if you know anything about yourself, that tapping is going to make you angry. So attention focus. Then there are others who like to involve deactivation as their way of preventing their emotions. They completely check out. They desensitize, they don't want to feel anything whatsoever, and so they cut people off. They cut their feelings off. Keep in mind that this is a very natural reaction after someone's experienced a trauma. When it comes to how we think about our emotions, remember that you can always reappraise your emotions before they get to be negative. So start thinking about, this particular event just happened. How can I figure out what emotion is appropriate? For example, I had a friend, and we were talking, everything was going great, and he said something that I found rude. And I thought, did he just say something rude? And then I reappraised my emotions. I brought to mind the positive aspects of our encounter. Everything that he had said up to that point was positive and something that I enjoyed listening to. And then I also considered the short and long-term consequences of overreacting, in that case, and getting angry, or outwardly expressing my anger, which may hurt the friendship because it was definitely new, or even made him think of me in a lesser light. Turns out, he was just being very blunt, and he was actually not being rude. Again, cultural variations are very important. So now we've talked about how we manage our emotions. You're probably thinking, well, Ms. Armstrong, that's great and all. I understand that I can deactivate or suppress, or I can reappraise, but emotions aren't easy. I know. There are definitely some emotional challenges. One challenge is our online communication, and the fact that we tend not to feel the same way when we are in online environments. For one, our online communication is usually asynchronous. That means that when I respond to someone, they may not be there right away to respond back. So it's out of time with what I want to say. Because of that, that may give us this advantage, this feeling of invisibility, that this person doesn't really see me. They're not really interacting with me. Therefore, I can say what I want to say, or express things the way I want to express them. Be mindful, though, that when we are operating from behind the screen, it does involve less perceptive taking. We tend to just think about ourselves and not so much about what other people may see and how they may understand what we're saying. So there's always going to be that empathic concern of, how do I still communicate this in a way that's positive, in a way that's helpful, that enhances our overall relationship, when I'm not as mindful when I don't see their face. Another challenge is anger. So sometimes we get angry because we feel that someone unfairly has interrupted us from getting what we want. Maybe they rear-end you. I know I get a little angry every single time I'm in the parking lot and someone gets that parking spot that's the only one left right before I get to it. Because it feels like, that's unfair. I saw it first. And that makes me angry. There can even be times where someone feels chronic hostility. This is going through everyday life in a suppressed rage. Remember that rage is that intense anger. Can you imagine what that would feel like to be in a constant state of anger all the time? If you're in this boat, if you feel chronic hostility, it's probably wearing away at you in some way physically and mentally, not just emotionally. So if you find yourself in a chronic hostile state, definitely start engaging in some self-reflexivity. Maybe consider therapy. When it comes to our feelings of anger, we usually want a feeling of catharsis. Catharsis is that relief that we get after we experience something very intense. Sometimes people use venting as their way of getting catharsis. Some people like to go work out. Again, however you get your catharsis, as long as it's a positive, healthy way of getting that catharsis, good for you. Because again, we would rather have catharsis through venting as opposed to increased anger from venting. I do know sometimes where I have gotten angrier because I was venting, and in some ways I was reliving the event as opposed to releasing the event. So keep that in mind as well. We can also engage in the Jefferson strategy as a way to manage our anger. You've probably done this at some point in your life, where you count from 1 to 10, and then you act or speak, Or if you realize that, hey, I'm still pretty angry, even after 10, make it all the way to 100. Another emotion that sometimes affects us in a challenging way is passion. Now, passion is a blended emotion. It is a mix of joy and surprise, with a few other feelings mixed in there. Now, one thing about passion is that it feels novel. Novelty as in newness. And because it feels new, we feel really excited. Keep in mind that passion can wane over time. Now, again, I'm not saying that strong blended emotions like love wane over time, because we see that joy and trust being something that we build over time, help create love. But what I'm really focusing in on is the fact that that surprise, that newness that we feel from passion does tend to wane because the person that we've known for years and years and years isn't really as new as the other person that we just met yesterday. We even have the emotion of grief. Grief is usually triggered by a loss, and this can be a loss of a person, maybe through a death, or maybe a ended relationship. It can be the loss of a thing. Maybe you lose your house, maybe through a tragic fire or a hurricane. It can be even triggered by the loss of a particular event. Grief can be very emotionally taxing. Just the same way that chronic hostility can start wearing away at you physically and mentally, this again can also start tearing you down physically and mentally. And grief can really last a long time. Not just a few days, a few weeks, a few months, but even a few years. Typically, when it comes to someone losing a loved one, especially a very close loved one in their immediate family, that can cause years and years of grief. I have an ex who lost a father, and that idea of just getting over it and dealing was very, very hard. They didn't want to feel over it. They still miss their father. When you're feeling grieved, sometimes it's hard to find people who get what you're feeling. This is one of the reasons why support groups can be very beneficial. Usually in a support group, people are also having the ideas of loss and grief. They may have lost someone the same way you did, or in a similar fashion. And because in some ways they get it, it makes it a little bit easier to share your emotions in that context. So if you find yourself in a space where you're trying to support someone who's feeling an intense emotion, make sure that they are first ready to talk. With my ex was definitely not ready to talk about it. But if they are ready to talk, make sure that it's the right place and the right time. Maybe you want to meet them at their place as opposed to a busy restaurant. Make sure it's also the right time. Are they super busy because it's morning time and they're trying to get ready for work? That may not be the best time. Remember to have good questions. This is not an interrogation space, but really just a moment for you to help them understand how they feel. Remember to legitimize and not minimize how they're feeling. Oh, you'll just get over it. Or, yeah, I felt like that once. I got over it. You'll get over it too. That doesn't work. That doesn't support your friend. Make sure that you're there and you're helping them understand that what they feel is real and that's okay. Make sure that you actively listen. As they're talking, don't interrupt. Don't offer advice. And if you do offer advice, offer it very cautiously, especially if you have not dealt with what they're dealing with. Furthermore, show concern and give praise where needed. Thank them for even coming to you with what they feel. And remember that our interpersonal connections really help determine our joy. So I hope this has given you a very clear idea of what emotions are and how we can express those in our communication.